Hello, welcome to FPLIQ, where today we're focusing on fixture swings, is FPL getting harder, matchups, player picks, captaincy discussions. But before we get into the juicy stuff, and especially a specific question I want to talk about the whole, and we'll probably do this during Ryan's wildcard section, where we'll think about the idea of swapping those Spurs players to those Arsenal ones. But before we do that, let's say hello to the crew. We're a little bit late because we've just been having a discussion before the stream. And then we realized we should probably just discuss it on the stream. So here we go. We're back. I'm here with Tien, FPL Planner, Teach FPL Lucian, and Ryan, MS28, who is Football Chat Box. We'll go around in a nice, orderly fashion again. So Tien, we'll start with you. How are you feeling, buddy?
Yeah, I know I'm feeling good. So currently on a work trip in Melbourne, so got to catch up with some of the FPL managers in Melbourne. That was great the other day, but yeah, can't wait to get into FPL mode again.
Yeah. Oh, and just a reminder for us on this side of the planet, well, for everyone, I guess it's a reminder, but particularly for us because of times, deadline is earlier. Again, we're back to an earlier deadline. So especially if you're on like a work trip, like you said that you are, then just make sure you have a look at the time. So I think it's 1:30 for me in the morning. So I think that's what, 3:30 or 4:30 for you guys?
4:30.
Yeah, so 4:30 for you Australian folk, for anyone listening, so just be aware that it is an earlier deadline. Lucian, how you doing, buddy?
The word is smarting.
Ooh.
I think I've learned my lesson now. My plan A's are always good. My plan B's are not. Yeah. The plan A was to persist with Son and Madison for exactly 2 weeks before bringing Haaland back. I did not have the resolve to resist the temptation of getting Haaland in. So I got Haaland in and I sold Son.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm
So
a
yes.
little bit disappointed that you were
Yeah.
so
Me
bold
too.
and brave to go without
Yeah,
Haaland.
I
Like,
know.
I honestly,
yes.
I even said, like, if I wildcarded a week later, I would not have Haaland in my team right now. I'd probably have Watkins and Alvarez as my two strikers, and I would have had money to go to Wilson with Isaac now out injured. He's someone that all four of us admire him in the game. But to a week later to take a -4 to bring him right back, you just couldn't do it. Just couldn't hold on.
Yeah.
And
Again, my plan A's are good. My plan A's are really good. This was justified and just mucked it up.
okay.
Mucked it up.
And Ryan, how you doing? You're on your wild card. We're going to talk about your wild card later on. I did ask you earlier, do you feel it was a little bit late compared? Because I was 7, Tien and
Yeah.
Lucian were both 8, and now you're 10. Now that was in our area of the good times to wildcard when we sort of said between 7 and 12, particularly between 8 and 10. So you are in sort of that sweet spot, but it does feel like the earlier wildcarders have a slight advantage. Do you think you would have gone early if you could go back in time, or still happy with the plan?
Well, no, because I think I came back from vacation like game week 8 and was on the pod, and I was like, I don't want to be wildcard in last minute without any preparation or anything. So that was never going to happen. Maybe game week 9 you could say, but then there was the whole. I felt like the fixture swing between game week 9 and game week 10. There were quite more teams that I could target, and to be honest, I came out with a green arrow and probably matched a lot of people who would have wildcarded anyways because I already had like double Spurs and whatnot. So I think I'm okay still. The only thing that I missed out is probably a lot of team value. That's the one thing. Whether that will come to bite me down later down we'll have to wait and see.
It feels a bit strange because my rank is decent. It's like 300k, but my team value is awful because I lost a lot of money on Pedro when he first went, and I lost a lot of money on Edsay when everyone else was sort of skyrocketing. I feel like I lost money on Gabriel because I started the season with him. Like, my team value is awful, but we said, especially if you only have one premium, a lot of us have Salah and Haaland, but if you only have one premium, money's still not an option at all, so it should be fine. So let's get into our first talking point, and it is one that I thought about when I saw a lot of points. Now, there's just some game weeks where everyone does well. Scores are good, template does well, whatever. But I was about 250k, and I got 79 points, and I felt pretty happy about it. You know, I went for Haaland captaincy. I've got Salah, Son, and Maddison. I got Trippier. Simicast got me a lovely early, 79 points. If I was to offer you this game week, hey, I'll give you 79 points now. I'd probably say, all right, that sounds amazing. That sounds wonderful. I'll take it. Thank you. And I've got a red arrow to like 308,000, something like that. Now, usually those kinds of drops are for people who are way up at the top, but I've also seen people who are 1 million or 2 million rank with 70 odd points, and they've also got a pretty sizable red arrow. So I just want to talk about whether or not we think, is FPL getting harder? Is it becoming more difficult? So we know that there's a lot more information out there, recommendation, content creators, tools, AI, guides, algorithms, models, whatever you want to call them. I just personally still think luck comes into it. So it feels as though last season and this season especially, the template has banged. The template has done really well. Pretty much any time there's been a template, last season and this season, they've all done incredible. You know, at the start of the season, people were penciling in Trippier from like game week 4 when the Newcastle fixtures turned. Even pre-planned templates have come in and absolutely taken off. So I do think, is it getting more difficult? Yes, because of all the extra information and guides and algorithms like I mentioned earlier. But luck is also still a major factor in the game. You've also got, I don't want to say lazy or like copycats, but people who are just either following content creators or people who are just following tools or algorithms or models or whatever. Which again, you're not just facing one brain against another, you're also throwing a computer brain into the mix, which obviously takes into account things like bookmaker odds. And that is huge because bookmakers hire like some of the best data analysts in the world because they don't want to lose money. That's how they earn their money, right? So it is, I think that adds to why it's getting more difficult. But I think the most important reason why it's maybe getting more difficult, and actually Ryan, I was saying to you before the stream about the value of like forwards compared to defenders, is the game of football itself has changed in recent years. And this is why we just don't have, because the FPL game has not changed. It's the same points, the same chips, the same rules, the same route to points. But the problem is football has changed. Even in the last year with all this whole inverted win backs and the likes of Trent or Zinchenko going into midfield, but they're not going to get rewarded for that. And the problem that we're having as well, and this has happened since basically Klopp with the likes of Firmino as a striker, forwards in FPL and strikers, the sort of your classic number 9s, are more rare. You've got Ollie Watkins, and that's why he's so popular. You've got Haaland, that's why he's so popular. You've got Isaac and Wilson, that's why they're so popular, because they are forwards who play as a forward. But the problem that we have is we have these wingers or inside forwards, you know, your Mo Salahs, the ones who are classed as midfielders who get more points. So the reason why we all want so many midfielders, like if we could have a choice now, we would probably all play 3-6-0. Like we would have like, or 3-3-7-0 or 3-6-1, right? Or whatever it is. We would want more midfielders because the way that football is played, those positions, your Son is a strange situation because he is like a striker and he's classified as a midfielder. He's out of position right now. He is the tip of the spear of the Spurs attack. So taking out those, most of those goals are coming from your wide midfielders, and that's why we've got a limited stack of choices to go for those players. But centre forwards hardly exist anymore. So it is getting more difficult because of all of the extra information and AI and tools and all that, but it's also more difficult because there's no more route to points, and the old route to points of your striker or centre forwards, think of your Van Persie, your Thierry Henry, the ones who used, the Alan Shearer, the ones who used to play down the middle, they don't exist anymore. And the ones that do exist, the ones I've already named, that's who everyone wants. You want Wilson, you want Isaac, you want Watkins, you want Haaland, because they are forwards who score goals. And that's the only way they earn points. Because you don't want a forward in FPL, like a Firmino, who plays as a false 9 or a central attacking midfielder. So it's getting more difficult because the game of football itself has changed, and FPL has not kept up rule-wise with how we can get more route to points. So maybe I would suggest, there's always suggestions on how to improve the game, but I think that they should just maybe really look into how they classify positions. I would personally love centre-backs and central defensive midfielders or centre midfielders to have their own way to get points, or make a new position in FPL to get more points, or make those players actually valuable, like your Declan Rice, right? Someone who, I don't know, interceptions or passes or whatever. But if you don't want to overcomplicate it, I think they need to be stricter with player positions. So, in my opinion, Mo Salah should be a forward. Like, if you are in the front line, you should be classed as a forward in FPL, and that would make it, I think, open up, because right now there's 100 points, which isn't that much in FPL. There's 100 points between 5,000 in the world and 2 million, and it's game week. We're going into game week 10. I can't feel there's ever been a season as tight, as compact in ranks as that. So it does show that that is also making it is getting more difficult, fact-wise, because there's such a limited amount of points between such a huge drop. So yeah, that's my part. Anyway, Ryan, I'm gonna go to you because you put it in the document. Do you think FPL's getting harder?
I think it's getting more competitive. I would say, in terms of harder, I think the general rule and like the general idea of the game is simple. It's kept simple for casuals and everyone, like more people to get involved. And I guess that's why it goes to the whole, like, when we want defensive players, right? I remember there was this conversation of like, make a player like Kante useful in FPL. No one's going to pick a Kante, no one's going to pick a Casemiro, no one's going to pick Thomas Partey or even a Rodri. Now, for them to be useful in FPL, you need to add like defensive points, basically intersections, tackles, maybe even headers, clearances, stuff like that. But like that then it becomes more complicated for the casual manager. And I think FPL as a game, or the people running FPL, they kind of want the numbers, right? End of the day, they want to show that they have 10 million players, 11 million players, 12 million players, growing and growing and growing. So they kind of keep it simple like this. Now, I think it's not getting harder, it's just more competitive, with more people being knowledgeable about the game. And I guess we are part of that as well, because as content creators, we're basically telling managers who come and watch us, this is what's happening. So people who watch us don't really need to do research, or don't have to like deep dive into the stats, because we ourselves will just start talking about players who are good, and the manager's like, okay, it's narrowed down my search, I just need to look into this tiny pile of players and then pick based on either gut feeling, or even sometimes some content creators will be like, these are the best players, go pick them. And I mean, the template is strong. We suggest good players for a reason, and they perform, and we're like, why is it so hard? It's so hard because there are so many people picking the same damn teams. And the few rank swings and the huge rank swings that we saw, and like even last season this happened, right? We were all bunched up. It was I would say last season we were more bunched up because Haaland was so strong in permacap, where the only way to gain rank was if you went different in the captaincy, or if you had one or two players, because the template also was really strong. We had one or two players who were different and they did well for you. This season, I think captaincy, or at least Haaland's permacap, is slightly decreasing week by week, and because of that, captaincy is now becoming more of a factor, and there are a few more swings. But a lot of people are more knowledgeable about the game, and we're a part of that. So, I think it's just getting more competitive compared to harder per se.
Tian, do you think it's getting harder?
And I think it's definitely getting harder, because it's just simply the fact that we're playing against so many different managers who are having access to so much information, so much more information than in the past. So in the past, we've got a selected group of people who are super engaged, right? And then you've got certain information that that you have that give you an edge, especially in the second half of the season, where you got that knowledge of the potential blind game weeks and double game weeks and when to play your chips and things like that. The sort of the more beneficial way of using certain strategies. But now a lot of that is no longer an edge because a lot of people have access to the same information due to the so popular content creating out there. So in the past, if you were thinking about competing with maybe 50,000 managers that have similar information, now we probably times that by 10. So the concept of the top 10k rank that used to be like a thing that we go for, right? It's like a elite rank that people try to aim for. Is getting much harder because there's so many people out there that have access to the same information with very little research that they have to do because of the content creators that tell them all the information they need. It's not just about like who to pick for this game week, who are the best players that you buy and things, or who to captain and things like that, but also like laying out the exact strategies of when you should wildcard, when you should play your free hit chips and things like that. And yeah, so it's definitely getting harder in my opinion. And then adding on top of that, the algorithms and AI projections as well, where people can just simply follow what the algorithm tell them, and they can certainly do well as well. So so in my opinion, for you to do well, you don't have to. You're not only competing with the super engaged managers anymore, but you are also competing with the managers that have access to the same amount of information, whether they follow the content creators or AI algorithms or computer projections and things like that. That just multiply the field by 5 or 10 times compared to the past. So yeah, it's definitely getting a lot harder.
Yeah, the thing is, the game's just grown. Think 10, 20 years ago, it's a fun thing you did with your friends. And then it grew to have more people with their work colleagues or whatever. And then it has become a couple of people within a small percentage within the group who play became more serious, started looking into things themselves more seriously. And then skip forward a few years again, you start to get websites that you can sign up for. So those out of 100%, 10% slightly become more serious. And then within the 10%, 5% of those became even more serious, started reading, started analyzing. But then you jump forward to sort of the last 3 to 4 years, it's exploded with content creators and it's exploded with team leaks, content creators who have specific fans for every single football club. It's like, it's gone from, if this was 10 years ago, you would have to manually go and search into each team's like history, rewatch highlights yourself. You might have a couple of mates who you chat football with and say, oh yeah, this one looks good. Now you don't have to do anything. You could literally copy and paste your team into Plan FPL and it'll say, yeah, I think this will do well over the next 10 weeks. All right, great, I'm done. See you later. I'm going to go watch a movie. But in the past, you couldn't do that. But I still have a couple of friends here that play FPL, and they just play it as like the ultimate casual. I don't mean that as an insult. They just pick players that they like, or they'll just do crazy, and it hurts me. I'm just like, oh my god. So one person in my friend mini league, they just triple captain Wilson at home to Crystal Palace. No reason at all. So he scores. Of course, Callum Wilson scores just as he's getting substituted. Like, the guy's on the sideline, and then Pope throws it to the wing, it gets crossed over to Wilson, he scores, and that's it. So his triple captain got a goal, it's fine. But there was no reason for him to triple. Like, as an FPL person who's done it for years who takes it more seriously than most. I didn't say anything because I don't want to influence him. He's playing it his own way. I'm not going to tell him it's not the best thing to do. I also want to beat him in the mini league, but it's just things like, he'll have Casemiro in his team. His midfield isn't Son, Maddison, Salah, Bowen, and Matoma. His midfield is like Declan Rice, Casemiro. It's because he thinks they're good football players. But if you bring it back to how many engaged managers there are now, you don't see that, and that's why we're getting similar teams, similar templates, and it is more difficult. Lucian, what do you think? Do you think it's getting more difficult?
Well, I am 1974, and James asked for a sermon, and immediately I was reminded of this satirical page, or maybe not satirical, parody page on Instagram. I'm not sure if any of you guys have seen it before. It's called Memes for Jesus. Anyone subscribe to the channel? It's hilarious. And I bring this up, right? This is going somewhere. I bring this up because there is this. Someone did like a Gen Z version of one of Jesus's parables on the mountain and whatnot, and the way he went about it was like, so Jesus waited for the live stream to start up, and when chat filled in, he went, W to those who stick to EO and stick to the EO picks. W to those who don't throw hands. W to those who don't go against the most annoying content creator picks out there. W to those who do not knee jerk. W to those who love saving transfers and playing 2 free transfers just after that. What else have we got? And it's become a sermon. Honestly, it's become a sermon in terms of the message out there that literally everyone says. And this, I like to blame the simplicity of FPL, and I wholly agree with Ryan's point. Because we, as extremely engaged managers, would love to believe that every ounce of hard work we put in will result in better results or more points. The unfortunate thing is that that's absolutely not the case, right? I mean, what's the word? Man plans and Callum Wilson laughs.
Oh, someone laughs.
So we're all looking at things that are way, way beyond our control, all the way to the point that Arteta has to intentionally bamboozle us by pretending that Bukayo Saka is going to start and then rest him last minute. I mean, it's gotten to that stage, right? It's like 2-3 different levels of game theory. Honestly, if FPL one day decided to hide ownership percentages and ban scraping from their websites, we'd suddenly get the advantage back. It's only like the reason FPL is becoming harder is not because of all the good advice out there, because there's a lot of different good advice. And we have all these content creators that, advertise the decision. I'm not going to say push one, but they're going to advertise the decision and make a completely different one. So they barely stick to their word. So, the question comes down to not what the popular people say. It comes down to what literally everyone else does. Because in the end, if you want to finish in the top 10K, you have to beat people in the top 10K to get in there. And if you're constantly watching the top 10K, you need to know the ownership of people within the top 10K. So by banning scraping and ownership and all those other things, you effectively eliminate the EO game. You forget about sword and shield tactics. You forget about what kills the game and not makes it fun. Because if I don't know who you own, then my game depends on me. It doesn't depend on you. So I think it is becoming harder because the growing number of people doesn't grow with it doesn't become as sophisticated as the numbers that join. So everyone, like, you get 10,000 people that play the exact same way. And in fact, I know of some content creators that have publicly complained that a subscriber literally mirrors his every move and gets the same 10K rank. And so what? You get there, But I mean, honestly, I like to thank you guys for giving me this segment because I want to talk about, like, two various schools of thought. And that, for me, is way more important than the difficulty. Because the question comes down to why you feel it's difficult. It comes down to why, or at least what objective up there you feel is so difficult to get. right? In the end, we all want to have a nice rank that we can, what's it, and like polish right at the end of our screen, like that, and look at it and go, that was well earned by copying my favorite content creator on the internet. Because that's how it works. I have people that ask me for advice, and I ask them, okay, what do you need? What kind of players do you like? What kind of player do you want? Do you want somebody that attacks the template? Do you want somebody that's genuinely good and nobody's seen yet? And they're like, I just want a guy with the most points. Okay, I'll grab my time machine. I mean, there are people who believe that, in the law of absolutes, where points are points. That is one of the biggest, most common sayings on the planet regarding this game. Points are points. And there's nothing that can argue otherwise. So, these are people who believe in form over fixtures, or at least maximizing some form of fixtures and predicting form based on fixtures. And they make good template decisions based on all these reasonable logic processes. So they get their good rank at the end of the day. But deep down, they know that, are they proud of the decisions they've made by getting those points? Some will, especially if they're swimming in cash by joining cash mini leagues, right? That shall not be named. And so if you have skin in the game and you have something to lose, unlike what I assume to be the other 50%, if you have something to lose beyond bragging rights, then you want to play it as if it were a job. And so rank becomes your livelihood. It becomes so bad to the point where, like, if you suffer from bad outcome despite making a good decision, you're criticized, you're demonized, chastised in some cases. And with such a huge influence on luck, right? Everyone will consistently play defensively and they will try to minimize error, as I have suffered here, right? So, it's very easy to say that letting go of Son before home against Fulham is a big mistake, despite bringing in Haaland, who also scored points. I acknowledge that. I will put my hand up and say, yeah, okay, it was risky and I paid for it. No arguments against it. So, I mean, this comes down to a tussle of this type of mentality against an emerging school of thought that depends on the complete opposite, probabilities. Because right now, back then, we just keep saying that, oh yeah, football is a process based thing, right? You take more shots, you get more goals. You have more of the ball, likely you'll score more goals. Well, before Pep showed up. And then yeah, if you're the number 9, as Rob said, you'll get more goals. The game, football as a game used to be that simple. And now in this day and age, when we used to label things by counting and just using our fingers to measure which number is bigger than the other, like, life was simple. The number of touches in the box would represent how good Matt Doherty is compared to, I don't know, Johnny, right? Although at some point Johnny had more touches in the box. But now in this day and age, everything is quantified into a 0.15 xg. Barely anybody knows what that means. I mean, let me ask you guys, right? If a player, I don't care whether it's striker, midfielder, or wingback, or N'Golo Kante, right? If he takes a shot that has a 0.15 xg, what does that even mean? What do you guys think it means?
Pot shot from 30 yards.
That's 0.05.
chance. 15%
much
chance
better.
of getting.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's the layman speak. Tian,
Yeah.
what does 0.15 xg mean?
0.15. It's a wishful shot.
So 0.15 xg means that if you took that exact same scenario with the exact number of defenders from the exact same location of shot, based on the scenario, whether it's a fast break or a set piece or a cross or a cutback, whether the shot was taken from his foot or his head or his shoulder, statistically, based on the last 10,000 shots taken, he scores 1,500 out of 10,000 shots. That is what 0.15 XG means. It's a statistical probability that we conveniently add on top of each other. And somehow we aggregate this into a beautiful, nicely packaged number, like a sausage, a very tasty sausage that you chew on and wonder what is inside, but you love its taste so much because XG, XA, and XGI taste so good. Makes you more pompous, more, what's the word, bougie. Oh, I'm on a roll. Okay, more bougie than the average casual user, that we can make threads out of them. I can read a table and I've got beautiful, things that, and there will be more stats like these in the future, such as X thread and X liveliness and what have you. Because statistical numbers that you add together gives you a figure. It gives you a more objective expectation. I would say that, yes, based on all these things that have happened in the past, Haaland is likely to score 2 goals against Man United next game. 2 goals, which translates to 13 points. He is expected to score 13 points. Anything above it is positive variance. Anything below it is negative variance. So instead of blaming it on luck, soft factors, unforeseen things, you just go, variance. I made a good decision. I suffered from negative variance. Much better. So I think there is going to be this struggle that allows us to define difficulty, because I think the way the game is played defines the difficulty for you. If you believe in absolutes, your difficulty involves building a time machine to see who scores more points over the next few, dependent on form, fixtures, and what Tian says. Because I believe what Tian says. Everything he picks, I do. And if I'm looking at algorithms, the difficulty lies in doing little things that you believe that the algorithm can be done better. Ignoring Haaland, for example. Tweaking James Maddison's X minutes to assume he plays 90 minutes instead of 75, according to FF Review, all these little things. Like, most algorithms are more malleable than we think. And we have to adjust and adapt to the new emerging schools of thought, because there will be some weeks where Analytics FC goes on a banger, and all these people will come out with, look at me and my Diogo Dalot, right? And no, I mean it, Diogo Dalot. and there will be some weeks where Grass FC, no, not Grass FC, like the content creators go like, you see, I kept Son against Fulham for this very reason, right? Yeah, and
Mbeumo
it's
versus Burnley.
yeah, or Marcus Rashford against Nottingham Forest. Nobody would have seen that coming. Like, sort of nobody, nobody in their right mind who watches Man United would have seen that coming. So that's where the difficulty is. Trying to put in justified effort that somehow rewards you. That's hard to come by. That's really, really hard to come by. That's where I feel the difficulty is. So yes, now we shall receive our benediction from Rob. So,
Just as a side note, Diego Dalot's XG for his goal was 0.0268.
that's a pot shot.
Just to tell you, the pot shot. Yeah, they're all 0.01. So yeah, 0.15 would be probably a shot from somewhere within inside the 18, but not necessarily clear cut.
Yeah. Can I just add a very quick point from what Lucien said? So obviously, there are many different ways that people basically, that people pick different ways that they can rely on to make that decision, right? Some people pick, the analytics, they pick the algorithms, or people with the eye test, they pick how they see the games and all that sort of things. But at the end of the day, what you see on Twitter or X these days, every single game week, or the majority of the timeline that you see immediately after a game week, are those who've done well in that game week, whatever that method is. So this past week, you see a lot of Analytics FC that came out and say, hey, look, this is a proof that, you know, this is the optimal way to play the game. But I haven't seen any of them in the last 8 game weeks before that. So, and then next game week is going to be someone else. Like, oh yeah, Grass FC is like, yeah, look at the game, you know, forget about all the algorithms, and this is how you should pick the players. I think at the end of the day, we've got to admit that football is more random than we think. We would like to think that we can find a way to predict the future, but we can't. So I think the sooner you realize that is the case, the sooner you can make peace with how you play the game and what the outcome is. But you can play exactly the same way as you did last season, and last season got you to a top 100, and this season you are sitting at a top 2 million, even though you play exactly the same way, because that's just the nature of the game. It's totally unpredictable. Well, not totally unpredictable, but there's a lot of things that are unpredictable that you can't find an optimum or optimal formula or way to play it. And I think it comes down to, you know, go the way, and you just got to accept that and enjoy the game for what it is.
I just wish people would stop calling it variance and just call it football.
Yeah.
Because that's what it is. It's football. It's not variance. It's not unlucky. It's football. That's Grass FC is always like, oh, it's not played on paper. It's not played on a computer. That's the part that I agree with. Yes, you can always combine them, but when you're telling me it's unlucky because, like Lucian was saying, oh, in the last 4 games they received an XG of 0.746. Right, I get it, right? Yes, they had some good chances. I saw it with my eyes. I backed it up with the stats. But that doesn't mean the next game. So coming back to Tien's point, from playing style from last season to playing style this season, it doesn't mean the next game is going to happen. So Luton have a weakness, or sorry, Sheffield United have an aerial weakness, right? I think they can see like the most chances. That's why people talk about Gabriel again on Wildcard, right? Because he's so good at aerial. How many goals has Gabriel scored, by the way? Like, they're acting like he's Haaland because, oh, he's an aerial threat. He's an aerial threat. I can't remember the last time he scored a header, but whatever. And people are thinking that because in the past they've not been good in the air, Arsenal are going to score a corner. So I can guarantee you guys right now, if Arsenal score a corner this weekend, that's it on Twitter. I'm not going on Twitter this weekend because it's going to be nothing but people like, I told you so, I told you so, I told you so, I told you so. And I can't do it. It's not very. And then if he doesn't score a header, it's variance. It's variance. It's unlucky. It's unfortunate. No, it's not. It's football. Maybe Sheffield United sat there this week and thought, that guy Gabriel's pretty good in the air. Maybe we should give him some special focus this game week. So there you go. Let's move on to matchups. And we're going to start in Manchester in the derby. Now, I did briefly talk about the Manchester derby last week because we were talking about, there was a couple of derby games last week, and there was a Liverpool one and there was a smaller London one. And I did sort of pinpoint and discuss the fact that it always feels like when Manchester United are in a derby, they seem to have like the biggest fluctuation. Like I said before the Everton-Liverpool game, that Everton weren't going to get smashed. And they were down to 10 men, and they didn't. It's just that Salah's walked away with a huge haul. But Everton didn't shame themselves. They weren't destroyed by Liverpool. You know, they had a red card, and they lost a penalty, and they conceded in the last minute. But it always feels to me like Manchester United, if they're against Man City, or they're against Arsenal, or they're against Liverpool, it feels like whenever they're in a derby game, they have the biggest fluctuation of like, if you tell me City's going to win this game 7-0, I'd believe you. If you tell me United's going to win this game, maybe not 7-0, but 5-1, I'd probably still believe you, because it always feels like Man United is just the team that has the biggest range when it comes to derbies. But end of speculation. Let's go to some assessment and what is going to happen for this. I just like Ryan's only sentence in the document of this, which just says United need a miracle. But we'll go more into detail than just that. I'm liking the optimism from Manchester United fans already. But as always, we'll start with Lucian first. Matchup: United, City, Derby. Let's go.
Sorry, just a quickly check. Are we gonna go through Ryan's wildcard eventually? I mean,
Yeah, at the
or is
end.
this it?
We'll
At
do it
the
at the
end.
end because
Okay.
we can have a more free
Okay.
discussion.
Right. Derby day. We've had so many derbies. I'm starting to feel the fatigue. I'm not sure about you guys because that's kind of how Man City are right now, right? They go 2-0 up in 30 minutes and then, whew, where'd Man City go? It feels like with or without Rodri. Like, I think they've only scored more than 2 goals once this season when they thrashed Fulham 5-1. So, and that even then that required like a relatively momentous goal right before halftime when Nathan Aki scored that header from the corner. So in this particular case, it's hard to say who will punish whom, but there are two key questions that everyone needs to address here. At least give their take on. Number one, with City being this ruthless without actually murdering teams, when they come up against United, will the tipping point of this match come from City actually punishing one of United's flaws and mistakes, or will United fall over their own feet? That is the first one. That I believe is relatively easy to answer, but the other one talks about Man United's flaws in a little bit more detail because quite a number of accounts online recently have pointed out that stopping United, frankly, isn't hard. A lot of underdogs have actually just left the centre backs alone, even though Maguire is such a big goal threat. And yeah, all they have to do is block out the midfield, and they'll do well. They've done it like Brentford did it most recently to Man United by dispossessing uh Bruno. No, it was Casemiro, I believe, in midfield. So the question is, will City replicate what everyone else is doing? Or do you guys foresee City having a relatively special plan, something in reserve specifically to punish United and hit them where it hurts? So we begin there.
Yeah. This is similar to how I felt about the Liverpool Everton game, that it feels a little bit more like my vibes for this one. And we all agree, we've got two United fans on the panel. I think we can all agree that Manchester United have been incredibly lackluster for the start of this season. And we talked even before this season started to say that Man United in the Champions League was because of their stellar defense. They were, whatever it was, 55, 54 goals or whatever. They were way, way down on the people around them. But David De Gea was Golden Glove winner, most clean sheets, but that defense has slightly crumbled. It doesn't make you feel any happier when in recent weeks you've seen Maguire and Evans lining up as your centre backs. But I just feel a Maguire masterclass coming along, and I'm not like memeing or anything here. I just think that the penalty save from Onana in the last minute, slabhead, the penalty save in the last minute for Onana, and the fact that Maguire scored as well, I just feel as though Maguire is the exact kind of defender that you put against Haaland. Because he's strong and he's physical and he's good in the air. And we said earlier about teams making specific plans. Everyone knows Haaland is the danger man. Everyone knows he's the one that gets the goals. So if you were to stick someone like even Varane, like let's not forget he's a multiple champion, is Varane. If you stick Varane on him or Maguire on him, if they're the back two, which I think they will be, I think that is enough to sort of try and nullify him, and then it's just going to come down to the rest of the team. I just feel as though it's going to be a Maguire or Varane versus Haaland situation. I think it could work out in terms of the setup. Wan-Bissaka's fit, right?
He wants that. He's not fit
Right.
enough to play.
So if that's the case, I don't think that they're going to do what they did against Copenhagen, and I don't think it's going to be. I think it's going to be Dalot at right back, and then I think he's actually going to start Lindelof at left back, and be more defensive than right. Because what's going to happen is, Walker gets down that right side, and they go in that kind of like weird back three that Pep has and pushes forward. If they have someone like regular, his bloody name. If they have Sergio at left back, that's going to cause more problems. So I do feel as though what will happen is that they'll allow Diogo Dalot to go down the right side, and they'll have Lindelof as a more defensive-minded left back / left centre back to cover the likes of Walker down the right side. So I think that's one way that they'll try and combat it. Feel free to come back and dismiss this later, but that's what I think is potentially going to happen. Everything is pointing towards Manchester City in this, but I just feel in a derby game, we talked before, you said earlier, Lucian, about it being like fatigue, but it just feels like derby game, especially the Manchester derby. Like, I didn't want to belittle Chelsea and Fulham. I'm not saying that they don't have a rivalry, but this is the Manchester. Just like last week, it was the Liverpool derby. Like, this is a true derby. If you were to give a list of English football matches that were derbies, this would be in that list. And I know that they've been lackluster, but now when we leave the analytics, when we look at the football, I just feel as though it's not going to be some destruction at Old Trafford that's gonna sort of finish United off for the season. That's just how I'm feeling. I'm not saying that there's stats to back that up. I just feel that Lindelof might be at left back to try and nullify it. McTominay is looking like a sure starter. So maybe I see Ryan going, "Ooh, you don't think he's going to start McTominay? You think he'll just come on?"
I don't want him to start.
What, you don't
McTominay.
want
But
two
we'll get to
defensive
that.
midfielders?
No.
McTominay
You
and
finish and I'll
Amrabat?
get it.
But
Maybe Casemiro and Amrabat.
But this is also like a situation where Casemiro has had a poor start to the season, but he's a world-class player for the big games, and he's proven it in big games, and this is one of the biggest games for Manchester United. So in terms of FPL, we're not focused too much about it. I think Bruno's the only player I'd be looking at. Potentially, I know that you've got Maguire in one or both of your drafts. I think he's 4.2 million. That's fair enough if he stays in the side. I don't think there's a huge wrong situation with that if he's just going to rotate in and out or just be a backup player. But I'd only be looking at Bruno. And the problem with Bruno is he's wonderful. He's fantastic. He's got no one to give it to. So wouldn't be looking at anyone else. And Manchester City, it's always Haaland, and it's pretty much now it's always Alvarez as well. I see him almost everywhere, and rightly so. But apart from those two, I won't be going anywhere else. So Ryan, then we'll go over to you then, because you got some thoughts about United.
Apart from the needing a miracle, I think there's only one last thing that Ten Hag hasn't tried, and that's playing both Amrabat and Casemiro in midfield. And this might be because he's never got that opportunity to, because the left back has been injured always, and Amrabat has played a left back. And the one time we had a left back, Casemiro was suspended for the Champions League game. So the thing with McTominay is, I don't think he's a player you want in that midfield, because he doesn't, if you checked his passes completed, he doesn't complete that many passes. He doesn't look for the ball. He doesn't come for the ball. And that's going to be a huge problem when that midfield battle is going to be very important come Derby Day. I think I agree with what Lucian said about not pressuring the midfield. And the reason I think they were better last season was because you had Lisandro Martinez, who could play those balls through, and he could bypass the midfield even if he wanted to. Maguire doesn't have the same ball playing capability, and Varane also doesn't have the same thing as Lisandro Martinez has. So that does reduce, and that does put pressure on United's midfield. Now, I don't know if he'll try this, but one thing what I noticed from the Champions League game is the first half they were bad, they were shit, they were absolutely horrible. If that first half team appears, United are getting annihilated. I don't even have to. They're getting annihilated. The control turned when Eriksen was on the pitch. Unfortunately, Bruno can't do it all, and he needs someone else to play with him, and that's Eriksen. Now, the problem with Eriksen, he doesn't have the legs to last full 90. So this is where I'm wondering, I don't know, because he's not tried it yet and we have no evidence, if we can put Amrabat and Casemiro, because Casemiro has been playing singly and with no help at all, because Mount and Bruno and all are way too attacking. Amrabat might help that out in terms of Casemiro, and that could be your pivot if you wanted to. Or even like Amrabat can play the box to box. And then give Eriksen that creative role from midfield. Or even move Eriksen front and Bruno deeper, whichever. That might give United a bit more control, and that might reduce the deficit. I think they'll still lose, but it won't be a bloodbath if they get more control in midfield. I think they might get a chance to counter, and that's probably how they're going to score. If they're going to score through transition football, I don't think we're going to dominate position at all. It's going to have to be through counters. And United are still, I think, even though the form is lacking, they're still one of the most good counter-attacking teams you can find. And I think they will give trouble to City. The thing is, can they win that midfield battle? That's the key thing. So that'll dictate the entire game in terms of how the scoreline goes. At least that's what I think.
Just be Casemiro's fitness, because I think he has a bit of an ankle injury or a foot injury or something like that. So.
Yeah, that's the thing.
But I'm sure he'll be itching to be fit, because he's the kind of player, he loves big games. You can see it. You can feel his experience. You can feel his passion and desire. Like, he's not a shrinking violet. He is like, I am the man. I'm going to do, like Bruno, right? I am the man. I'm going to do this, and we're going to win this game, right? So, good player to have. Tien, fellow United fan, how you feeling about the derby?
Yeah, I think yeah, there's a lot of Ryan to say that I agree with. I think it's crucial to see that if Casemiro and Amrabat playing sort of the double six roles and Bruno is a true number 10, then we may have a chance. But at the moment, or so far, like Ten Hag has never been able to try that. So the whole back line has been unstable. He's been switching between different personnel, and Bruno has never really been deployed in that true number 10 position. Because even when Amrabat and McTominay play, McTominay tend to actually push up more, and Bruno is always sort of dropping and trying to play that sort of ball making position where as an FPL option, you don't want Bruno to be all over the park and playing the ball from the deep. But he won't be playing true number 10 unless we got Casemiro and Amrabat kind of like control the midfield in front of the back four. And so so I think that's why Casemiro fitness is crucial. Mount, I have no idea where Ten Hag intend to play him. So when he comes on, is he number 10 or is it double number 8 with Bruno? Like, who knows? So it's, I don't even think that Ten Hag has found a formula for Man United. Obviously, injuries have been playing a big part in that, but basically the whole team has been very unstable. So I think it's gonna be a big struggle against City. So hopefully, finger crossed as a Man United fan that Casemiro is fit and then he can play with Amrabat holding the center midfield, and Bruno can kind of help out in attack. Then we can at least try to to keep City at bay. But yeah, it's gonna be a difficult game. For those who are thinking of Maguire, and I've got a few people asking me about Maguire as well. Of course, he's cheap and he's got some decent fixtures to come after this game week. But in my opinion, he's just a big trap. Because if So Varane is fit, and if Lindelof can play alongside him and Reguilon can play in the left, well, then Maguire could lose his place. At the moment, it looks like he will stay, but you never know. Like yes, at 4.2, it sounds a bit tempting, but it could be a transfer in waiting as well if you go there. So for me personally, if you are building a wildcard now, and if you got like a fourth defender spot that is a transfer in waiting, then I think that's probably not a good idea. You rather go down to like a 4.0 and it's gonna be a permanent bench option, and then use that 0.2 to upgrade elsewhere and play that, rather than taking a punt on Maguire, because he's definitely not gonna score another goal in any time soon, if that's okay. And do you punt on Man United giving a clean sheet? I think it's gonna be a rare occasions. Like Onana's not gonna save a penalty again anytime soon. So yeah, let's put a fight down on onto that.
Yeah. So I think a key, you've already said it, counter-attack. This is why I think it's very important that Mount doesn't start for you. If you just have two holding midfielders, put Bruno as the 10 and have two fast wingers like Rashford and Garnacho, with Højlund down the middle, I think you'll stand a better chance to hit them on the break. No team is going to beat City for possession 99 out of 100 times, right? And that's how you score against them. So I think it'll be key to see if Casemiro starts and if Mason Mount starts, because if they go for the double eights again, oh my word, Rodri might get on the score sheet if that's the case, because it'll, as you said it yourself, Ryan, it'll be a bloodbath. But let's move on to Brighton against Fulham. So the next two teams that we're really looking at is Brighton and Arsenal in the fixtures, because this title of this stream is Fixture Swings, because a lot of people, after I think it was game week 3, started to get off Brighton assets, and people on wildcards in game week 6 to 8 got off Arsenal assets. So the big question is bring them back in. Brighton are on the lower price scale, where you don't really have to sacrifice a lot to bring any of them in, but Arsenal, that we'll talk about later, is obviously a big question mark, because that's going to make some huge decisions for people in this week. But starting off with Brighton against Fulham, how are you feeling about this fixture, Lucian?
2 months ago, we were raving about how Brighton was so well prepared. Their starting 11 was settled. They had some very interesting signings, and they had so much depth up front. As of today, they don't have a left back. Fortunately, as we mentioned before the stream, that Danny Welbeck injury paves the way for Joao Pedro and Evan Ferguson to start. I think that's as good as it gets in terms of good news. So the real question comes down to how they will win the easy games rather than who technically thrives. In this particular matchup, I think I'd like everyone to address what you guys have observed of Brighton so far, at least in terms of attacking down their left, because I think it's safe to say, at least it's safe enough to say, having looked at ownership percentages, people still widely own Mitoma. A lot of people have been let go. I think a lot of people have benched Estupinian for a very long time, waiting for this very game week. So, I personally am quite grateful he's gone down to 5.0, because I do intend to let go of Medicash to sell for Estupinian at some point. So, the first game back, Fulham, right? We have our Mittomas, and the question comes down to whether the situation at left back, whoever they feel, I think it was James Milner that came in for the injured Solly March. So if James Milner plays left back, how will it affect the situation up front? Secondly, mentality. I think this is something that we have to look at very specifically, because Brighton do not have their first choice central midfield. I'm not talking about the Caicedo-McAllister partnership. I'm referring to just anyone that isn't Pascal Gross. I think Brighton have prioritized with the Europa League so much that they are now starting the likes of Baleba, Hinshelwood, Gilmore. I mean, they will rotate anyone and everyone in that central midfield slot. And at times it has worked, by dismantling Man United, for example. Sorry about that. But at times it has also fall flat on their faces, and leading to some key defeats. So the question is, will they punish their opponents' weaknesses as they have done brilliantly well at the start of the season? Or will they look at their opponents and react according to speed and verticality, which is how they have been behaving over the past 2 to 3 games? Let's go.
Yeah, so you made some good points about so defensively. I don't think we're looking at Brighton. We've talked about how leaky they are in defense. I think they're still on 0 clean sheets, right? And we're only looking at Estepinian because of his ridiculous positioning and ability in an attacking sense. He's one of those special defenders we put in the category of at times Matty Cash. Trippier's kind of in his own category of sometimes being like a right wing. Trent goes in that sort of special category of defenders that you always want a clean sheet from a defender, but you've got that extra hope that they're going to get something in an attacking sense. But we're not really looking at the defense. And we, like you said, we said before the stream started, it sounded horrible, but Welbeck being out helps Brighton's attack because we're all, I think all 4 of us are pretty impressed by Ferguson. I mentioned before, I said I put him in the category of Wilson in if a player got minutes, he's in the side. I've already made my transfer this week and I had to because of money, but because of the news as well. I brought Pedro back in. A lot of people won't bring Pedro back in because he's dropped in value for them at some point this season, or he's 5.3 million. But he can rotate with Simicast for me, and I think he can play both positions. He could play the 9 or he can play the 10. So I think that makes him very useful. But I also did that because of money, because with Morris was going to drop, I didn't know how far, I didn't know about Pedro and other prices. That this means that I don't have to choose between Son and Saka. I can actually go from Maddison to Saka if I want to. So that's the final decision to make. But in terms of the attack, March is a big loss. But they've got players in waiting that'll come in. So if it was anyone else but March, then it would be fine. But Matoma, I brought him in earlier because when I spoke to Tien and he said, bring him in for City. Yeah, he's blanked, but I've got him in. He's there. He's ready. He's the most advanced player. I think he's the most likely looking player for this side. And I would be so. I've pointed Brighton out because we all know how good they are when they're on the day, when they play the Derbym way. It's lovely. But I think a lot of people who wildcarded earlier didn't wildcard Brighton in because the fixtures swing from now. And I think that's going to come back to haunt them because everyone's focus is on Arsenal and what to do with Spurs. And maybe they brought Bowen in on their wildcard, someone like that in game week 6 or 7 or 8. And they've forgotten a little bit about Brighton, and I think that's going to bite people a lot more. Matoma is still like 36.9% owned. That's going to hurt. And even Pedro is 9.3% owned. So these players are going to do some damage. So just to highlight these, I said earlier about the value of these players as well. This isn't going to cause you to sacrifice anything. But I would potentially be advocating for hits to bring these players in because their run starts now with next week, not necessarily, but they've got Fulham, Everton, Sheffield, Forest, Chelsea, Brentford, Burnley up to game week 16. In terms of the matchup, Fulham, I think I said I didn't do it, but I was going to triple captain Haaland against Fulham when they play because of how bad they are, and they didn't have Palhinha because he was injured, suspended or whatever, and then he was going to Bayern Munich and he didn't, so he had a bit of a sulk and didn't play, and Fulham was still defensive back. They're still bad. I said last week when I talked about captaincy, when I had Haaland was number 1, Son was number 2, Salah was number 3 in my order. And I mentioned that even though Palhinha's back, they've got defensive issues. What happened? The defender who came in, Bassi, was at fault for the goals. Because on one of them, he passed the ball away, and on the other one, he played them all onside. So they still have the same defensive issues. So even though Brighton have injuries, we already know that the squad is deep enough to have good cover to come in, and they're cheap. When Bonate, I think, is like 4.8 million. Pedro's 5.3. Ferguson is 6. Matoma, I think, is 6.5. Like, these players are incredible value, but I just don't feel as though a lot of people are talking about Brighton because they're too busy focusing on Arsenal. And I think here is where a lot of people could potentially get a lot of points for this one, because I would even throw Matoma in the captaincy mix this week. Like, why would Matoma not be in the discussion for captaincy? Because I can see Brighton getting 3 goals in this game. Like, how? If I ask you this question, how are Fulham going to stop this side? If Brighton keep the ball away from Palhinha, who I think is an incredible player, how are Fulham going to stop this Brighton side from scoring? The only problem, the only sadness I have in this game is there's no Estepinian, because if he was available for this fixture, they would destroy that Fulham right side. It would be a massacre. Like, I can't see how they're going to stop them. But yeah, have to be careful because they've got Ajax tonight. So with the way Brighton's luck's going, we're probably going to have Ferguson going off injured and Veltman with a bust kneecap or something like that. But if all goes well, Brighton are definitely players. Like you said earlier, I think, Lucian, you said they're fixture proof, right? Like, why would you not be itching to bring these guys in against Fulham? Because I've not seen anyone say anything about Brighton. I don't know if you guys have seen, apart from wildcarders, who are probably, a lot of them have Matoma in a draft. Maybe they'll be looking at Pedro as a cheap striker or Ferguson as a cheap striker, but they're all going to have Alvarez and Haaland or Watkins and Haaland as their strikers. And I still think a lot of people are going to miss out on these guys. Tien, Brighton, Fulham.
Yeah, no, I think I'm very happy to have Mitoma in my team. So, I know that he hasn't got any returns in the last 2 games, but at least in the City game, for example, he did have some good chances as well.
Two chances,
and
yeah, he did.
And that was again Man City, like one of the best defenses in the league. So yeah, and obviously I had him with the eye for these upcoming fixtures. So I mean, it's understandable, and I mean, this is how the mindset of a lot of FPL managers works, right? They just look at the last few games, and Mitoma has blind, in all of the in the last 3 games. It's like, okay, well, he's not in form or whatever you want to call it. But of course, he's been playing, Villa away, which, Aston Villa at home is a very good defensive team. He's played Liverpool and Man City in the last 2 games as well. So yeah, like, kudos if that's how you pick a player. You pick play on how they did in the last few games. The way I look at it is like, Brighton team is going to be a very attacking team against a very leaky Fulham team, and similar to City in a way that if you can pick the guy that plays the most minutes in this team, attacking wise, then he's probably gone onto something. And I think Mitoma is probably one of the players who will play the most minutes. Of course, depending how they play in Europe. But if everything goes well, then you would expect Mitoma is the guy who plays the most minutes. Now, obviously, besides him, due to a few injuries that they have recently, Adingra is a very good option. That if someone is on a budget and need an enabler for a few weeks, I think his 5 million is a very good option given the injuries that they have. I would go for him over Cole Palmer any day for the same amount of money. Just because he's got to play the fixture and he's looking like that nailed out on that right flank.
He started 4 of the last 5 and the last 2 games.
Yeah, Exactly. Yeah. Given the injuries that they've got at the moment, so yeah, for anyone on a budget that need an enabler, I think is a very good option.
Great. Ryan, thoughts on Brighton or Brighton Fulham particularly?
Well, after our initial conversation before we started the stream, I did went and tinker it and was trying to fit in Mitoma because he's like someone I would want. And I did find a way at the expense of a certain Jared Bowen. But we'll come to that later. The thing with Brighton is, I think Mitoma is the only one who I am, as a wildcard even, I would be confident in putting in there. Everyone else I feel is a rotation risk, unfortunately. They got, we mentioned, you already touched on their depth, right? They got insane amount of depth, even though they're not experienced depth. They got players that Derbym can put in there. If needed, he'll put in players even out of position just to get players in there. Now, the Europa League fixture, we'll have to wait and see what happens in that. Seems like Ferguson is not going to be playing for that fixture, at least based on some news that I saw, and I was trying to find it and I couldn't find it now.
I saw he was starting. I saw Gilmore, Pedro, and Ferguson was starting.
Okay. We'll have to wait and see. So depending on how that game goes, and hopefully if there are no injuries, then I think for me, Mitoma definitely for the number one spot. With regards to what Lucien mentioned in terms of will that left back spot be a problem? I think it might still, but I don't think, at least if we look for the next couple of fixtures, I think Estupinan will be back sooner or later. So I don't think it'll be a problem for too long. And Fulham isn't going to be a tough enough game, I feel like, for that to be a problem for Brighton. And if you look at the data as well, Mitoma's numbers are still pretty good. He's up there with like most of the top midfielders at the moment in terms of like XG numbers and everything. So he's still a really good option. So I would go for him, but everyone else, I'd probably wait and see whether Ansu Fati gets into the team, whether Adringa plays that, because Fati is also a winger. He could probably play that right wing spot as well. He could play the number 10 spot. So that's one thing that I want to wait and see. And yeah, Estupinan I'll probably wait once he's back and then probably move Matty Cash out for him.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Like I said, I went for Yao Pedro because he's not necessarily a starting 11 player for me, but we said earlier the great thing about him is he can play two positions. Like Ferguson is a striker, like the end, right? If he's not the striker, he's not going to play anywhere else. But you could see Pedro starting as a 10 with Ferguson in the lineup, or Ferguson's not in the lineup and Pedro's the striker, right? So the good thing about it. But they're so cheap as well. Like this, maybe going into this run of fixtures, you could argue that Brighton are the most good bang for your buck value team that's going to go into this next. So last up, and it's specifically a fixture on many people's minds because I think it's got people panicking a little bit because it's Arsenal where a lot of us don't have any, or maybe we've just got one, going into a really nice run of fixtures for the Gunners, and they are against rock bottom, sorry to say, woeful looking subpar Sheffield United. Lucien, we'll start with you about the matchup and how we feel about these guys.
Well, it's it's the key difference really between the elite veterans and the casuals, isn't it? I think the biggest question mark really comes down to identifying momentum because I think conventional wisdom says that with fixture swings comes good results. For Arsenal, it may or may not be the case, especially since their last few games. I mean, you got to look backwards as well as forwards to identify the fact that City have kept Arsenal technically down to one goal. So even if we look beyond the Sheffield United game, Newcastle is on the horizon. So the real question, if you're on a wild card, you get three of them, no problem. But for the rest of us, a lot of us, I think the key question comes down to who are you sacrificing for Bukayo Saka? A lot of us are going, oh, I'm selling Son. Do I need to sell Son? Oh, I'm selling Madison. Do I need to sell Madison? Personally, my plans were to sell Luis Diaz. do I need to sell Luis Diaz? So it's debatable in most cases, and I understand that Arsenal has every right to thrash Sheffield United, and so let's sit in the hypothetical boat for this particular matchup and assume that Arsenal will get a good result against Sheffield United. It's not going to be 8-0 like Newcastle, but they're going to get a result. So first things first. Will we see symptoms of Arsenal being a flat track bully? Because the 4-0 win against Bournemouth aside, it's actually difficult to tell who will actually perform against Sheffield United. Because the truth is that Arsenal don't really have a goal scoring talisman. Well, unless Bukayo Saka takes all his penalties given to him. So it's a big question mark there. And this is what really we will be looking for. Is the strategy around Arsenal to stick with the consistent playmakers such as Saka, such as Ben White, such as Odegaard, who all stuff up the right side? Or will we rely on chaos? Do we want to have two attackers, one with fixed returns such as Saka, and one who is more chaotic such as Martinelli? Or should we hold tight and just sit on double Arsenal for a while? Like wait for the Sheffield United game and the Newcastle game to pass, and then we sit on Arsenal defense from game weeks 12 onwards. Just go with double Arsenal since Ben White does have decent attacking threat and Gabriel can potentially score from a corner. And that's where we begin our discussion.
Yeah, the key question here is there any hope for Sheffield United that people can hold on and wait to see if they're a flat track bully? Because I think that's a really good thing to see. Because here's the thing with Arsenal. They're not... Saka is incredibly consistent. He's excellent. He is one of the top FPL scorers. He's not explosive, though. Like, I'm not saying he can't get a really, really good return, but he always ticks along. He's like Watkins before he started scoring. He'll tick along with an assist, but he won't explode. I don't feel like he's going to do a 15-point haul like a Son or Salah or at times even a Maddison can do. That's why I think the question isn't between Son and Saka, because I think Son is better than Saka. I think the question is it Maddison or Saka? That will also require a sacrifice. We've said before, you can't own them all. You cannot sit there with Haaland and Salah and Son and Saka and Maddison and Trippier. So if I wait to game week 12, I could sacrifice Trippier and I can move Diaby or Matoma to Saka. I don't think the question here is selling Spurs players for this game, because you said it as well, Arsenal don't particularly have a goal scorer. They'll probably win this game 2 or 3-0. If Saka was on penalties, that would make me more worried about it, because that's obviously another route to points. Sheffield United are the second worst team for allowing double-digit hauls. By worst, I mean like they give up the most. So if you have a player against Sheffield United, they are second. You want them as the second option because that they'll get double-digit hauls against them. They concede the second and most amount of double-digit hauls.
Who's first?
I want to say Luton.
Burnley?
Or Burnley. It's one of the other promoted sides, but I can't
them.
remember because the newly promoted sides are a C with everyone. The thing that sways that, though, is Burnley and Luton have had fewer games because they didn't play each other, right? No, they've caught up now. But anyway, Sheffield United are second. But you don't just look at this game, because next week Arsenal are going to play Newcastle away from home. So if you've got Son, you need to look at multiple fixtures. If you go wait till game week 12, you've got Arsenal who've got Sheffield, Newcastle, Burnley, but Spurs have got Palace, Chelsea, Wolves. It's incredibly difficult, but we are talking about Spurs who are playing nothing but this all-out aggressive attacking football, whereas Arsenal, I think it was against Nottingham Forest, they had no big chances in that game. Like, they dominate possession, they look good, but they don't seem to, apart from Bournemouth, they don't destroy teams. I don't feel like I'm going to get a huge thing from Arsenal players. They are they're lower than mid-table for big chances. They are mid-table for total attempts. They are like 6th or 7th for attempts inside the box. And they are 7th for goals. Spurs are 4th. Like, it feels like it's a sideways move for now. Fixtures are king. I do think we need to see if they're a flat track bully. Saka has slight niggling injury doubts. Is he all right? Is he not? I just personally feel that I wouldn't go from Son to Saka in this game week. I would hold for 2 more game weeks and then maybe aim for game week 12. But it's incredibly difficult. If I were going to make a move, I would potentially do Maddison to Saka and captain Saka. So if I'm not going to captain him, I'm not going to take a -4 to bring him in. But this is the biggest, I think this feels like it's the biggest question in FPL this week. Do we go from Spurs to Arsenal now? Because they've got 2 promoted sides in the next 3 games. And my gut feeling is to say no, because I haven't seen enough from Arsenal's attack when I'm watching the games and looking at the stats to make me think, oh, that looks tasty. I watch Maddison and Son play football, and I think, oh, most of the time, this looks good. This looks like I can get something from any time from these 2 players, despite coming off at 80 minutes. I watch Arsenal, and yeah, they're getting the results, but I don't feel like I'm going to see 15 points from Saka. And I wouldn't be going anywhere. I'd be going Gabriel, and I would be going Saka, and that would be it from me. Because you're not going to go for Gabriel Jesus as a forward. People might look at Martinelli, but he's 7.7 million. Matoma's 1.2 million cheaper. Diaby's like $1 million cheaper. Why would you risk going for Martinelli for this run of fee? I wouldn't go there. For someone who could easily lose his place at times to Trossard. And let's not forget Smith Rowe still somewhere in the wings. So this one, it does massively favour Arsenal to do this one, but we have seen situations where Arsenal have a positive fixture where they should probably score 3+ goals, and they just haven't. They've not even created a lot of chances against it. Forest at home, 2-1. Fulham at home, 2-2. Everton away, 1 goal. Bournemouth is when they got 4, and the other games were closer. I just think that this is probably just going to be 2-0. But I said the same thing last week, and then Salah still walked away with a big haul because he scored a penalty in a very, very late goal. That just happens. But it's so difficult. That's why I'm throwing it out to you guys as well. Is this the time to go from Spurs to Arsenal? Because my ranking would be Son, Saka, Maddison, but I still don't feel comfortable selling Maddison, despite Palace have an incredible defensive record. Like, are they not second behind City in terms of like all the stats and what they do? Like, Palace are a great defensive side. But yeah, Tien, I'm going to throw this over to you then. So, what's your first thought on this fixture, and then what is your Spurs to Arsenal feeling about this?
Yeah, I think we should be sitting here and say this is not a good fixture for Arsenal, and Saka is not a great asset to bring in. I think he is, and I think Arsenal are certainly a favourite to win this game. I think the key point for us as FPL managers at this point in time, wildcard managers or not, is to think about what can we afford to fit in our team. So obviously, on the wildcard like Ryan, and we're going to see his draft later, I think it's a no-brainer to bring Saka in. But even doing so, he'll be sacrificing someone else, like a Son or Maddison, as he said, who are also very, very good options. For everybody else, the decision will be which of my really good asset that I'm gonna sell to buy a really good asset in Saka. And that is gonna be a problem for every single FPL manager out there, whoever that might be. I mean, probably the only few exceptions I can think about is those who are on a United asset, for example. But if someone who has a
Rashford.
Bruno or Rashford, and they are thinking of selling them for Saka, I think that's a no-brainer. But selling a Son or a Madison or even a Luis Diaz for Saka is extremely difficult. Now, obviously, against Sheffield United, great fixture, but Spurs against Palace or Liverpool against Nottingham Forest, great fixtures as well. So, yeah, and of course, you don't know what's going to happen in a single football game because anything can happen. Like Arsenal can beat Sheffield United 2 or 3 goals, and Saka may not be involved at all. You never know, right? And the fact that I think we can't discount the fact that Saka has been giving away the penalties. That fact cannot be underestimated because, for the like of Haaland or Salah, that is the key, right? Salah may have a very poor game, but if he's got a pen, that changed everything. Saka, when Arsenal got a pen, you don't even know whether he's going to take it or not. And I think that's a big, big factor, in my opinion. So I think for that reason, if people are thinking of bringing in Saka because it's always been their plan or they're on Wildcard, yeah, no problem. But if they are forcing a transfer to bring in Saka, I think people can think twice about that because not only this game week but next game week as well, because playing Newcastle away is going to be a very, very tough fixture. So yeah, personally for me, I was always looking at Maddison to Saka this game week, but now I'm thinking twice about it because can I go without him for Sheffield United? Because if I can, then of course I can go without him for Newcastle. Then I can look at bringing him for Burnley in game week 12. In which case, losing a Maddison at that time will probably be a little bit easier, for example, or at least we've got 2 more game weeks of information that we can look at. That because a lot of things can happen within the next 2 game weeks. So yeah, I put out a tweet, a couple of days ago. No one is essential in my opinion in this game. Haaland is included and Saka is one as well. Like if someone think that no, against Sheffield United you have to have Saka, I don't think so. Because there are many other players that can potentially match or outscore Saka in this game week.
Yeah, I'll need a sofa for this game, but I'll probably sell Trippier in 12 and keep Maddison, and I'll get rid of Matoma or Diaby. Because it feels better to get rid of a defender, and I can still get like a 5.5 million defender, which I can get a lot of value from somewhere, but I just don't feel good selling Son and Maddison. Like, just don't. But they're scoring a lot of goals, they're playing really well. But I think it's one of the toughest FPL conundrums we've had so far this season. To sell your Spurs assets, because you always make a point in about when to jump off an asset. You jump off just as they hit the pinnacle and as they're coming down to jump onto the guys who are on the way up. So Saka is a player that should be on the way up now, and Son and Maddison should be on the way up. But I'm not seeing that downwards curve yet. Like, is it going to be too early to get off players who are in form? I think that's the question that people are going to have to answer themselves. But I'll be... so just a quick... before we go on to our quick reviews, because I don't want to go on for too much longer, but I'm not... Ryan, you're wildcarding, so in a way you can split if you want, but I'm not going from Spurs to Arsenal. TN, do you have Arsenal now? Do you have Saka? No, you have Spurs. Are you going Spurs to Arsenal?
I don't think I will.
Lucian, are you going to Arsenal?
I'm selling Udagi for Gabriel this week. I'm slowly phasing them in.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting to see when I can sell Luis Diaz.
But no Saka. So you're going to stick with Diaz over Saka? Yeah. So it's tough. Like, no matter, like, and it's that weird situation that if you sold Diaz and he does well, it was still the right move, or one that was slightly more favourable for Saka. But if you've got Diaz in, we've talked about this before, you've got Diaz in for a reason. For a certain amount of fixtures and for certain things he can do. I think it was FPL Lens Gabriel who posted about Diaz's potential this week against Forest, that he thinks that Salah might be more of a creator and Diaz might be the scalpel for Liverpool. And you just kick yourself. I think you kick yourself more when you sell someone and they do well than when you bring someone in and they don't. But right, let's review player picks. We'll start with the man who is banging form this season with his player picks. Tien picked Trippier. He did all right. He did all right. He did all right, I would say. This is our player picks from game week 6, 7, 8, and 9. Tien, can you just give us a quick rundown on how Trippier did in those games?
I think he did all right.
He did all right.
18, 12, 6, and 10
It's
in the
all
last
right.
4 games.
Yeah.
He's done all right. And I true to my word, I bought him in game week 6 as well. So I think the lesson to learn there is when I pick a player and I actually go ahead with buying that player, they can do well. But yeah, no, guys. I mean, it was a fixture play, right? And like Spurs had a very tricky, tricky start to the season, with playing some really tough fixture, but the underlying stats were there, the defensive stats were there, and Trippier put in really, really good attacking stats as well in terms of crosses and chance created and all that. So I predicted between 2 and 3 clean sheets. They got 3 out of 4. And Trippier got 6 assists in 4 games. So I think that's probably enough said about this pick.
Yeah, he did all right. I think we can say that.
He did all right. Yeah.
All right. You have to have that high pitched tone to really drill it home. He did all right. Yeah. But here's the thing: you chose a player on fixtures. I chose mine on a player who was mass sold, but also had excellent fixtures. I went for Marcus Rashford. I cannot believe. So I thought he was going to punish. I thought he was going to come back. He was going to punish the mass sellers. I sold him. I think it was on my Wildcard. Yeah, I think he was on my Wildcard, maybe before actually. But 4 blanks. He played Burnley, Palace, Brentford, and Sheffield United. He played 2 newly promoted sides. He's back on his beloved wing, and he's not got a thing in those 4 games. Palace, I admire the defense. Great. Burnley, nothing. Sheffield United, nothing. And Brentford at home is bad. I don't regret the pick per se. I'm scolding the player because I just feel that is just awful. This is a fail. Not just for the points he got, but his performances have been subpar. It was a bad pick because I've talked so many times about how Manchester United don't score a lot of goals in attack, how Bruno is so key to the team. I should have just gone for Bruno instead of Rashford, but I just thought, you know what? So many people have sold him. Stomp on them, Rashford. You go get him, boy. And he let me down. He's let me down big time. So that's just a big fail. So we'll move on to... We had three of these 4 picks were Newcastle players, by the way, because the fixtures were so good. Wilson was the man chosen from Lucian. It was risky.
Well, would 13 points from 4 games be considered a fail, or just a yellow, considering his injury record?
I think, was it last week, TN, you chose Wilson, and I just have the same argument. I love Wilson. I say that he's like the best value player in the entire game of FPL, but you can't pick him because he doesn't have the minutes or he doesn't have the fitness. And the minutes. Now, Isaac went off injured after like 15 minutes. So Wilson might have a good run of games, which is wonderful. If that's true, get him in. They've got good fixtures. He's an incredible player. The fixtures why TN chose Trippier is because Trippier is nailed and they were easy fixtures. So do you think it's a success? Are you going to stick with the orange area?
So he got 6 points against Sheffield United. That is the minimum I expect out of Wilson. It's just such a shame that Newcastle won 8-0 instead of 2-0. I think with 2-0, Wilson would have had every chance of getting maximum bonus. I think the biggest shame was that he didn't recover from the international break, and he did not pass the late fitness test against Burnley, which was the other fixture I was targeting. So I'd say, yeah, 6-0 from something that we fully were well aware of, is something that we can probably expect to come to light yet again. I think Wilson has every right to be substituted on the 70th minute mark for any other winger anyway, because Newcastle can do such things. The question is whether Wilson will score in games that you don't expect him to, because Isak was the star against West Ham, and Wilson did come back, start, and score against Crystal Palace in a 4-0 win. Again, right? So you ask yourself, if Newcastle won 2-0 instead of 4-0, would Wilson be within the bonus? So I can't ask for more, because 2 goals in 2.5 games is, it's a good rate. Good rate. So if, let's say, I had a good first sub that came in for Wilson that delivered, such as a Pedro Neto, I'd be, yeah, okay, I'll take that. But as it stands, yeah, I'd still say it's orange, because you took the good with the bad, and I think he just lacked that cherry on top, that second goal that would give him a 13, that would say, yes, big green. And yeah, he just performed par to the course, really. I'd be happy with that.
Yeah, so just to quickly add on that, right? So last week we all talked about him. So now it looks like Isaac is injured again. Are we gonna go there? So yeah, the answer is probably yeah.
It's a game of alternatives, right?
Yeah, just let alone every other alternative. Like, of course, at the moment we won't be because of the good alternatives out there. But even without the alternatives, I think, yeah, like now thinking about it, it was a punt, like too risky of a punt to go for, in terms of, like, yes, we know that when he plays, he's a great option. But he doesn't play very often because of his injury record.
Yeah, and because of
that, I think when it comes down to, like, would I be comfortable picking him as a player to bring into my team? Probably not very often, even with the lack of other alternatives. So yeah, no, I mean, I had my reason when I picked him last week, and you had your reason to pick him for game week 6. But we all fell short of the appreciation of that X minutes and the injury records that he has. And yeah, if you genuinely ask me in game week 5 or in game week 6 that would I actually buy him for my team, I probably wouldn't, because of that. Like, it's like, yeah, it sounds like a good punt.
I think,
but to actually buy him is like, because you got to consider all other factors as well.
The biggest factor that pushed me over the edge to consider Wilson, to recommend Wilson, was the fact that everyone at the time right, in game week 6, we were really popular with Haaland and Alvarez. And we literally had nobody else. Everyone was busy
Exactly.
searching for the Jackson replacement, right, at that price. So there were only two candidates: 5-point man Ollie Watkins, or Callum Wilson, which was arguably a 6-point guy anyway. So you look at that, right? And for me, it's about knowing when to jump off. Like, I also targeted Sheffield United and Burnley like you, and in that situation, if let's say hypothetically I would own Wilson, right? I went ahead with it. The moment I see Wilson fail that fitness test coming back from the international break and not featuring against Burnley, I wouldn't care what happened against West Ham and Crystal Palace. I would have sold straight away for Ollie Watkins, because it was at that exact moment Ollie Watkins got 23 points against Brighton. So I think, over 2 games, I think is reasonably okay. But it's also important to know, as you've said time and time and again, when do you need to jump off?
Is it from Rogue One where the actor says, like, you were this close from greatness? Because Watkins got 9, 23, 5, and 11. You're this close from greatness. Speaking of being close to greatness, but being vastly unlucky, Ryan went with Botman. I mean, you would have been
so good.
You would have been with TN. I mean, this comes down to me as a non-applicable. It's NA, because he got injured. He had a wonderful start, but yeah, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, looking back at it now, I just take it as an L, and I just consider, because like 12-0-0-0, but it started so good, and I was like, when I sent that player pick over, and when TN was rating it over, the reason I said was he was a better value pick compared to Trippier, and it started so well. I was like, yes, but then he went and got injured. Now, it depends on what you did after he got injured, whether you kept him. Oh, like I kept him, but then I got in Guehi as well, and I got a 9-pointer from Guehi. So I was like, okay. But just because of the fact that I missed out on those remaining Newcastle clean sheets, I guess I put it as an L. But at the time I picked, we were looking for Newcastle options, and Trippier was expensive, and this guy was the next best.
Yeah, I just think it's null and void, because they got 3 clean sheets in those 4 games, and if Botman was fit, he would have. I'm pretty sure he'd have played him. So I don't know. It just makes it null and void because he's got injured. Like, imagine if we pick someone this week, and in the first minute, I don't want to wish anyone harm, but in the first minute of this game week, they go and break a toe and they're out for a month, right? We're not going to sit here in 4 weeks and be like, oh, bloody hell, Tian, that was a terrible pick. He got injured after 1 minute and he was out for 4 games. Red, fail. I just think this one's really unlucky. So let's look forward for the next 4 picks. Ryan, because we're starting with you, because that's the order it goes in. You're a defender. Picking a very popular player right now. Who are you going with?
We all love cash. Whether that's really about this thing, but I'm going for Matty Cash. He's got Luton, Forest, Fulham in the next 3, and he is the 3rd highest XGI defender in the last 6 game weeks. And if you were to look at the entire season, he's the highest XGI defender in the entire season. And if anyone was to tell me he'll get a double-digit return in one of those 3, I won't be shocked. The guy sometimes even plays as freaking right mid or right wing. And touch wood, we do get a double-digit return, or 3 of them. But even if you were to wildcard now, I would still pay 5.1 or whatever he is and get him in.
Yeah, 5.1.
Because looking back at what Trippier did, where he almost got 50 points, Matty Cash has the same potential of doing the same thing that Trippier did. So that's basically it.
I think we all have cash, right? Yeah.
1.1 million in the bank, exactly.
Yeah, it's 33.8% owned, so he still does a good, but yeah, easy pick, solid pick, no issues. Midfielder, I'm going for my man Mitoma. I bigged him up already when we talked about Brighton. I said that they're a bit hidden, a bit undervalued, or ignored. Fulham at home, Everton, which I think is probably the most difficult game of the 4. Sheffield United at home, and then Nottingham Forest away. He's had a rest, which he doesn't usually get. Usually he gets right into the ground, which I think why the end of last season he slowed down a bit because he was getting used left, right, and centre. But now he's had the international break off. We said earlier about in the Man City game, he had 2 decent chances, and that's away against Man City, the best defence in the league for the last however many seasons. But the key thing for me here is he's going to face Castagna, maybe Ashley Young, Bogle, and Aurier in the next 4 as his head-to-head. And if you're going to have a player that people would say is fixture-proof against those full-backs going down the wing, I think that's very hopeful. Bowen and Derby were a close second and third. I do own Derby myself as well, and I have since game week 2. But when Brighton play well, Matoma shines, and he's the one that'll do the damage. He's the highest player forward, even though they've got these injuries now. I still think he's the man. Going to striker, who is Lucien.
Okay. I'm just logging into the YouTube channel to see who's part of the graphic because I put 2 names up. So Rob, could you tell me who's on the graphic right now?
Ferguson.
Okay, thank God. Okay, yes. Joao Pedro and Evan Ferguson were 2 names that came to mind when I first thought of recommending a Brighton player because this name with a huge caveat goes out to managers, who are unable to afford Watkins and have decided that a -4 and -8 is just not worth the trouble. Evan Ferguson and arguably Joao Pedro at 5.3 is much more affordable, and I think Evan Ferguson would be probably the third striker that will afford you Salah, Son, Madison, and Bukayo Saka in midfield. I think that'd be perfect. The question comes down to what the justifications are for owning Evan Ferguson. Because number one, we have to monitor Danny Welbeck's injury status because he could be injured 1 week and he could randomly pop up the next week, right? Second being minutes. There is this big mentality myth thing surrounding Evan Ferguson that he has the tendency to be subbed off at halftime. So that's maybe a myth, that may or may not be a myth, and it all comes down to tactics. But at the moment, what's more concerning is whether you would prefer Evan Ferguson at 6.0 million or whether you prefer the currently more popular 6 million or 5.5 million players, right? You've got Pedro Neto in the mix. You've got Gordon from Newcastle in there, and that's where the real dilemma is. Because I'm recommending a forward position. If I had the midfielders position, I'd definitely recommend someone like a Mitoma or even an Ansu Fati. But right now, the decision rests with Evan Ferguson. But at the same time, I will also heavily monitor Ollie Watkins' progress. But just for recommendation's sake, if you cannot afford Ollie Watkins, which is the extremely obvious pick, I'd definitely pick Evan Ferguson for this upcoming 4 fixtures only.
Yeah, great shout. And wildcard pick any player in the entire game of FPL TN. Who are you going for?
So yeah, I think after kind of suffering with the slight setback with Wilson a couple of weeks ago, I think I'm just going back to the basics. A talisman for a team that is about to run into a great set of fixture. So Jared Bowen is one of them because he's the talisman for West Ham, and they're going to play Everton, Brentford, Nottingham Forest, and Burnley in the next 4. So great fixtures, and he's put up great attacking stats, especially against poor defensive teams as well. So I think when West Ham and Bowen plays again, a strong defensive team, you can expect nothing from him. But I think when they play a poor defensive team, it's very reasonable to expect something attacking returns from West Ham, and when attacking returns from West Ham, who do we expect it to come from? I think it's more likely than not that it'll come from Bowen. So yeah, I'm expecting 2 or 3 attacking returns in the next 4.
Okay. We'll do captaincy and then have a final chat about Ryan's wildcard. So captaincy, Haaland always a good option, but Derby the variety in the what is it? What's what I'm looking at? Volatility of a Derby game puts me off a little bit. Salah's Mr. Consistent. Faces a Forest side who just conceded 2 goals at home to Luton. Psychologically, I think this will make a lot of people captain Salah because he's on the back of a big haul. If he'd have blanked against Everton, I think fewer people would have captained him. But he was extremely lucky. I think he was massively lucky to walk away from that with 16 points. That's one of the... I own him, so it's not like I don't have him. I own him. I watched the game. He scored a penalty. Yep. One of the reasons we have him is a big tick in his box is he's on penalties. Fine, I get it. And then he scores right at the end of the game. But I thought Mykolenko had him in his pocket all game. I didn't think Salah particularly did anything to walk away with anything from that. And he's walked away with a huge haul because that's what Mo Salah does. But looking at that game and looking at like analysis from myself and also, like I said earlier, about Gabe, about FPL Lens, about him maybe being pushed out wide. If Darwin's down the middle, I don't like it when Darwin plays because I always feel that takes away from Salah, makes him more of an assister rather than a goal scorer, which takes away points. Matoma at Fulham, I think, is a really good outside chance. And then you've got Saka against Sheffield United. I think this is a really varied game week where a little bit like last week, it just felt like Son, Salah, Haaland. They were the big 3 choices. But this week, I think you could go out there. I think you could go Matoma. I think you could go Saka, Salah, Haaland. I would say the Spurs guys are slightly lower on this because they've got Palace away, and Palace are a pretty strong defensive side. But this is, I think, incredibly difficult captaincy this week. Currently, my captaincy is on Salah. Is it on Salah? Let me check. It's on Salah. But I've got Derby as my vice captain because you've got Luton at home. And I couldn't find it in time, but hasn't Aston Villa not been beaten at home in 16 games or something? Don't they have a really, really, really good home record? So you've got Watkins or Derby. Why would you not captain them at home to Luton? You've got a great attacking side in Villa at home to a newly promoted side. You've got a top team, but not great attacking wise, but hugely dominant in Arsenal at home to a newly promoted side. You've got Fulham, who are one of the worst defenses as well, against Brighton, who I think have the most goals. They're third. So Newcastle have 24 goals, Aston Villa have 23, Brighton have 22. Why would Villa and Brighton not be captain options against 2 of the worst defenses in the league? This will be a late decision for me. I'm not sure. If I do go Maddison to Saka, I'll probably captain it. That's the only reason I'll bring Saka in this game week, if I give him the armband. But I don't think I'll do that. But if I had Saka in my side, this would be an even bigger headache. I've had Derby since game week 2. I don't trust him with the armband. He sometimes comes off at 60, 65 minutes. So that narrows it down to Haaland. Derby games are too volatile. So I think I'm going to be going with Salah as my captain. But if Salah was injured, I'd probably go to Matoma before Derby and keep Derby as my vice. But yeah, I think Salah is number 1 for me this week. Lucian, who's your captain? Or captaincy choice?
I didn't consider Ollie Watkins as captain, actually. That's a really good shout.
Luton at home.
Wow. That is literally the best fixture, right? Other than Burnley at home.
Or Sheffield United at home.
Yeah. Wow. That is eye-opening. Thanks, Rob. The captain's armband is currently on Mohamed Salah. And yeah. I should say that I made Gabe's slides together with him. So you know, I think we had a tussle about this where he thinks that Salah will create for Diaz, and that's fair. Uh yeah, just for the record there. Um it's largely because of recent times, Diaz has been the one creating for Salah by rotating positions with Darwin centrally in this game. It's just that uh Darwin didn't start against Everton, and that's why Liverpool looked so stop-start. So, I think when Darwin comes back, actually Salah will benefit by being narrow. That's the weird thing to say, but I think the fact that Salah has goal and assist potential makes Salah just a safe captaincy choice.
Yeah,
But
just
man, this Ollie Watkins captain pick
but
is oh
DRB's so good. Like DRB should be in the top 5. But the amount of chances that either he's missed or Watkins has missed that DRB set him up for is the reason he's not. And that's what puts me off. Not just the early subs. And don't Aston Villa play in Europe as well today? So if DRB plays in that, you got to put tied legs on to an extent. But something that puts me off maybe a little bit about Forest is Forest have a very secret... I know they've just conceded 2 goals against Luton, but they have a very low-key good defense. They are
at home.
At home. Yeah, we know historically away they've been pretty bad, but they've conceded the 4th amount of shots. I know they're going to Liverpool. It's a big game, but just in terms of chances, big chances, they're higher, top 10. But big chances conceded. In terms of conceded shots on target, the in the top 1, 4, 5, 6, the 8th, top 8 for big chances conceded on target, and their top 4 for goal attempts conceded inside the box. And remember they went to Chelsea and kept a clean sheet. I think Forest just have a low key, decent defense. So, they drew 0-0 with Palace. They beat Chelsea 1-0. They
conceded 2 against
They lost to
Luton.
Man United, Rob. They lost to Man United. That's
Yeah,
how bad they are.
conceded 2 goals
3-2.
against Luton.
Yeah, just the last game. It's 2 goals again. But they're going to be rested, and Villa are playing Europe. Be a fresh side. There's definitely pros and cons. It felt Haaland was the clear one last week, and everyone returned. That's the reason why we all sat with ridiculous points and red arrows, because everyone we said Haaland was the worst of all the players. We said, I said Salah, Son, Maddison, and Haaland. They all returned, and Haaland was the worst one. It could be a similar situation this week. Because if I told you all those players that we've talked about so far would get something, you probably wouldn't disagree too strongly. Tien, your captaincy thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think it's gonna be an open week as well. Yeah, you got quite a few very decent options, and whichever narrative or reasons you want to put down to select whoever, I think you can't go too wrong with that. So for me, I am currently on Salah, mainly because he's clearly on pen. He's not gonna give his pen away. Watkins is not on pens anymore, I don't think, and Saka is potentially on pen, but he's also potentially giving them away at any single point in time, which, I mean, you can't predict that when they're gonna have a pen, but that's it is a big factor, because I think Salah in the last 2 game weeks, you could argue that he looked poor for a lot of the the majority of the game, but then he still managed to nick away 2 goals, one of which was a pen in both games, right? So, and that's what he can do. and there's no reason to believe that he can't do that again. And Darwin, like Lucian mentioned, that Darwin being like and potentially starting the game, is potentially beneficial for Salah as well, because it will be either Salah creating for Darwin or Darwin creating for Salah. And I think someone said that Darwin has 8 assists
And
in
they're
total.
all for Salah.
All of them were scored by Salah. So I think Salah has certainly added a different dimension to his game as well. Like, he's not only scoring goals like he used to, but he's also assisting as well and creating good chances, which will put him in well into the bonus point as well. So if he does anything in attacking wise in the game, he's in the bonus. Whereas previously, he needed to score 2 goals before he even got into any bonus point. So I think he's a clear option for me. But yeah, of course, if anyone want to go for Saka or Watkins, yeah, I'm not gonna sit there and argue
bad.
against that at all.
No.
They're all great options, and even Haaland, like Haaland against United, you can't never discount Haaland.
Never. And if Salah scores 4 goals when he's playing bad, that's scary.
Yeah.
I know. Even if you take his penalties away, he scored 2 in 2, and he's not having good games. That's worrying. It's great from an owner and captain point of view, but it's worrying for everyone else, basically. Ryan, your captaincy thoughts?
So I've been toying in between Haaland and Salah, and for most of the week, it's been on Haaland. And the reasoning being, we've been in this situation multiple times before, where United happen to play one of these so-called tougher fixtures, and there's a really good other captaincy alternative. Go back to Salah when he had United and Havertz had Norwich. We go back to Salah played United last time, and I don't know what happened last season into who was the other popular one, but again, hammered there. We had Haaland playing United and Salah playing, I don't know who, it was a really good one, but Salah came only with 5 points in that one. And Haaland came away with a hat-trick and 2 assists. So I've been in these situations, and all of those times, I felt that United team was way better than the current United team. In every single one of those times, I thought that United team was better. And they got hammered and annihilated. And this time they're even worse. So it's just based off fear that I'm leaning more towards Haaland. And he scored 2 goals in the Champions League this week as well. But yeah, I feel like it's just a coin toss for me. I could flip a coin and I'll be like, yeah.
And you're always going to have effective ownership protection.
Yeah.
We all know Haaland can score every single game, but if you captain him, you're not going to lose anything. You could be happy with all the players in your team. Whereas if we don't captain Haaland this week, he's probably going to still be quite a bit over 100%, which means if he does get anything, it's going to be negative. So that's always going to be a plus in Haaland's column, because he's giving you rank, to an extent, rank protection all times.
Yeah.
We can have a quick chat about your wildcard, Ryan, because I can't stand for too long. I'm sure you guys are late where you are. These are his 2 drafts. Currently looking at. Ryan, so you want what the key things you want?
So I made one with the Trippier draft and one without Trippier draft. The key players that are all, regardless there, is like I got Saka, Maddison, Salah, Watkins, Haaland, Cash. The 2 goalkeepers are the same. I got Tsimikas as well. All of that won't change. Now I'm leaning more towards Trippier, because we could say, okay, fixtures are going to get harder, but him and Newcastle are just so good right now, that I just want to take that chance and go, okay, if Trippier doesn't work out, I can downgrade and I can upgrade elsewhere. That's fine. But if Trippier continues to work out, it's going to be impossible to get him after, and that's my current problem. Now, we did have a discussion before we started where we were talking about Bowen and whatnot. So I did go and tinker a bit with the Trippier draft, where I can downgrade Bowen to a Mitoma, upgrade Douglas Lewis to a Gordon, and that way I get 2 of the high XG teams. And I can also upgrade Maguire to Gabriel and get an Arsenal defender. And still play a 3-5-2 with probably a better midfield, maybe. I just have to sacrifice Bowen.
I think Bowen is sacrificable. I don't think his fixtures are as good, and he doesn't play in a team that I know he's the talisman. I know they have good fixtures, but he doesn't play in a team particularly renowned for being attacking or for scoring loads of goals. So earlier I said like Brighton have scored. Newcastle scored the most goals. Villa are second. Brighton, Liverpool, Spurs, City, Arsenal, and then West Ham. West Ham have scored 16 goals, which is it's all right. It's upper mid-table, but can you really think of times when you thought, "Oh, West Ham dominated that game. West Ham were all over them. West Ham have walked away with 5 XG and they had 20 shots on goal." Like if you had to compare, like I said, Bowen is 7.4 million, right? Matoma's 6.5. Derby is 6.7.
Yeah.
Like, I just feel like if there's a player to sacrifice, it's probably Bowen. I see you've got Maddison, Saka. Like Saka and a wild card, I think is easy. I just still would have Son over. I think Maddison's the third choice, but money. You said earlier, price rises of not.
And also, I wanted Trippier.
Yeah. Because like I said, game week 12, I'd have to sacrifice Trippier to get Saka in for Derby or Mitoma. But personally, I think Bowen is still a great option. I'm not, of course, we all know we can't have them all. But if there was one player, so if you sacrifice Bowen, you'd go to like
go
Gordon
to Mitoma, and I go to Bowen to Mitoma, and I upgrade Douglas Lewis to Gordon, who I think is a better upgrade because Gordon is playing for a much more attacking team. And obviously Maguire gets upgraded. Yeah,
and then Maguire gets Gabriel.
Yeah.
Then Gabriel would maybe go in the starting 11 for Lascelles.
Yeah, over Lascelles. Yeah.
There you go. I know you're not double downing on the clean sheet for Newcastle, but Trippier's enough for that. But you'll have an Arsenal defender who's going to play Sheffield and Burnley in the next 2. Douglas Luiz is great when you've got penalties, but you can't just rely on that. And like you said it yourself, I think Gordon, it's a shootout then between Gordon and Mitoma against Bowen and Louise, and I just feel Gordon and Mitoma wins that personally. And then sorry, you also, because it's a trio, it's always a knock-on effect. People always just say, "Oh, it's Louise against Gordon." No, it's not. It's Louise and Bowen and Lascelles, because he's the one in your starting 11, right? Against Mitoma, Gordon, Gabriel, and I just think that second option is a lot better than the first, because it's never unless you're doing a real swap for swap, like Son to Saka, like a direct 1-for-1. This is not. This is a situation where you're going to have to make 3 changes to your starting 11.
Yeah, and I can get Bowen later as well because his fixtures are still pretty good for a long time, and Villas will go pretty bad, so I can downgrade Watkins if I want later, and then upgrade Gordon later if I wanted to.
Yeah, sort of like game week 13, you could go Villa to West Ham. I don't think West Ham's are that good for long term. They're scattered.
I think if you don't get Bowen now, you don't get Bowen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because by then you probably want to get like Mbumo back or someone else, but probably not Bowen. I think I agree. I think the second option that you just said sounds better. Trippier, Toma.
The other one is
Gordon.
I don't go with Trippier at all, and I get both of them, like Bowen and Mitoma.
No, I'm not talking about the second draft that you've got on the screen. I'm talking about the second option that you go
Gabriel,
from
Gordon, Mitoma.
on the left, which I think Gabriel is definitely better to have, and Gordon is definitely better than Douglas Lewis. So to sacrifice Bowen or Mitoma I don't think it's a big sacrifice when you got two clearly better options, and you get to keep Trippier as well.
And
So I think
to be the
that is
boring
that is a very solid. Yeah.
to be the boring boy in the room, you're also giving yourself slightly bigger rank protection because like Bowen's like 20% owned and Matoma's like 36.9% owned. So it's just it's a horrible. Some people might say it's a horrible way to play, but you know, if you want to sort of protect yourself against rank as well, like if you've got a player that's sort of say they're 8% owned and you want them, but there's you can't quite get them yet, and they do go and bang, it's not going to hurt your rank. It'll hurt your feelings, but it won't hurt your rank as much as, you know, if you go Bowen over Mitoma and Mitoma does bang and Bowen is a bit quiet, that's going to be a bigger problem. And I do think lower ranked players still have Mitoma, either dead teams or teams that just didn't take him out after game week 3 or wildcarded very early and kept him in. I think a lot of people with Mitoma have bad ranks right now, and they're the ones that'll overtake you. Like if you look at live FPL where it says like overall rank and then like rank near you, because that you've had it sometimes where you've got a player who's like 20% owned, and you think, oh, that's great, Bowen, 20% owned, that must be pretty good. And then rank near you, 68%, and you're like, oh, that's not good. That means he's not as good in my area of the field, right? That's what I saw when, because I got Mitoma in just like a week or two ago, right? And even though at that time was so highly owned, he's still high at 36.9%. Around my rank at like 300k, it's not a lot. So if you've got people chasing behind you with Mitoma, could be an issue. The rest of the squad, like this is why I asked you at the start, do you think it's been a bit too late? Because I don't think there's any players that you've got that people who wildcard in game week 7 or 8 couldn't have or don't have. Like you went for, like, if I was to wildcard again, because I went differently, I went 4-5-1. I think there's more value in defense. That's why I got like Trippier. I brought in Simicast now, but I've got more in defense with a 4-5-1. But now I'll have João Pedro play 3-5-2. But I think a lot of people who wildcard in like game week 8, especially, have pretty much what you've got right now. Like, yes, you've got a couple of very new players like Lascelles because Botman is out supposedly longer term, and Maguire and Simicast. I mean, I brought Simicast on a free transfer, but most people don't have him. Simicast, Maguire, they're new players back into the fold, but they are not star players. They are not usually starting 11 players. So I just think that this team isn't as much different as anyone who wildcarded in game week 8. Like, Tien and Lucien, you both wildcarded, right? Let's turn Lascelles into Gabriel, because that's what I was thinking, and Bowen to Mitoma and Luis to Gordon. Is that much different from what you guys have got? Tien, you're still Alvarez Haaland, right?
No, I have Darwin, which who will very likely to become Watkins. So I chose not to go with Watkins and Son. But I think I think Watkins will come in. So the only difference I'm seeing between my team and this team is that I won't have Saka straight away. But then I've got both Bowen and Mitoma and Diaby as well.
You have them.
So so I have them. So it just means that my midfield is full. I don't have a space for Saka unless I want to sell Madison, which I'm not willing to. But a lot of people will be having like Son and Madison double up. A lot of them will probably sell one of them for Saka, which then again make it very similar to that. But then a lot of them won't have Owen or Mitoma. So they may have one of them, but a lot of them won't have both. or even either. So yeah, as I said, that there are more good options than we can accommodate in any team, regardless of when you wildcard it. Like, people wildcard at 7, 8, or 9, or they're wildcarding now. There will be really good players that you have to leave out. But for example, I still have a Spur defender. Like a lot of people, I think a lot of people will probably sell one Spur defender for Gabriel, which is of course perfectly fine. But at the same time, like for me, keeping a Poro against Crystal Palace, I have no problem with that at all, either. Of course, I can sell him for Gabriel, but I don't think that's an upside move anyway,
Not
compared
urgent.
to getting a Watkins, for example. So yeah, I think it's just a dilemma for everyone. Everyone is that which good players do we have to leave out, and yeah, what the outcome will be, who knows? Because there's a lot of people who go without Haaland, which they've done really well, and well done to them. That's the thing. Like their team looks really good because they don't have Haaland. They have so much money. Some people did bring him back straight away, but
For -4, yeah. Some people.
or -4, but yeah, that's the thing. Like if you think about, in my opinion, no one is essential. Like you've got many good options. It just who do you fancy, and how do you set your team up, what you can afford, and what sacrifice you are happy to go with. Because at the end of the day, you do have to make sacrifices. There's no way that you can have a perfect team.
I think you got 9 players the same as me, and I wildcarded Gameweek 7.
Ryan, may I?
Yes, go ahead.
You have your starting 11 has 7 common players with my starting 11. So I think that's not an issue. Not an issue at all. It just means that you're 2 to 4 moves ahead of people who wildcarded early. And what I'd like to say is that Bowen pick is really, like, I mean, based on the players you are touting as alternatives, that Bowen pick is really hurting you. Because for me, the glaring hole is actually Julian Alvarez. Yeah.
That's a
But
Watkins move.
no, I just rather own Julian Alvarez instead of Bowen. So it's quite easy.
Oh, you mean go
They are
3-4-3?
literally
3-4-3.
3 for 3.
yeah.
See,
The other, I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
if I were to spread the funds around and not consider Alvarez at all, right? I just go like Bowen to Diaby, so that your Douglas Luiz can turn into Gordon, and that allows you maybe that just enough money to turn
Mabama.
Tsimikas into Gabriel, and you'd have a really balanced team.
And then Mabama
yeah.
to Julian Alvarez.
No, I can't do it.
Really? Like Bowen to Diaby, Luiz to Gordon.
Or
And-
Go into Diaby.
Or Mitoma. Or Mitoma. Because Mitoma's
No,
going
Mitoma will
cheaper.
Mitoma is cheaper, yeah.
Oh yeah, okay. So Bowen to Mitoma, Douglas Luiz to Gordon, and then Tsimikas to
No.
Gabriel.
No. I can't.
How far off are
That's
you?
the thing. So I have Saka, Mitoma, Madison, Gordon, Salah, Watkins, Haaland, Cash, Gabriel, Trippier, and Alvarez, along with Lascelles, and the 2 keepers, and an empty spot, and I have only 1.7 in the bank.
Yeah. I think Alvarez is a tough one to fit in.
Oh no, I mean
yeah.
this is if you're getting Alvarez. I mean if you ignored Alvarez, right?
No, you do Louise to Gordon, Bowen to a 4.5 million, and then Mabama to Alvarez.
If I do Bowen to like Palmer, right?
Yeah, Bowen to Palmer, Louise.
I have like
keep
3.3 still.
Louise if you want.
3.3.
And an empty spot.
This is the thing. So by going late, I have lost Timber. That's the one
Big.
thing I have
Big.
unfortunately lost, and I can't do anything for it. But then the thing is, at the time, my squads were still in par with how the wildcard teams were, because I still had the Salahs, I had the double Spurs, The only thing that I lost was the potential to gain on those price rises of Watkins and Trippier. That's where I missed out on.
Yeah, I think Alvarez. Yeah, Alvarez, as good as he is, I think you have to wait.
Yeah,
So
I
that,
think
you
I'll
know,
play the fixtures for that.
in 4 weeks time or something, Watkins can become Alvarez,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
4 or 5 weeks
United,
time.
Bournemouth,
For
Chelsea, Liverpool, Spurs, Villa away. I think.
for the record, I do
Yeah.
prefer the first lineup because I think Trippier the hold until game week 19.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, I think you can keep Trippier. So the only main sacrifice from the first team is Bowen.
Yeah.
So Bowen down to Mitoma. You could even argue that that's not really a big sacrifice,
Mm.
right?
Alright.
And then you got Gordon, and then upgrade Maguire to Gabriel as well. So I think that's a much stronger team. Yeah. Anyway.
Good luck for the end of that. That was scratching your head. You've only got a day. Remember, tomorrow night you're gonna have to finish this early deadline. All right. Thanks for everyone joining us today. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Good luck. Remember, early deadline. Whoever you pick as captain, I'm sure will be a great choice. Don't kick yourself afterwards because all of them have a lot of value to bring in. So if you choose the wrong captain, it just happens. It's not variance. It's football. All right. We'll see you all next week, guys. Take care.